Well, welcome back. Some city leaders targeting financial firms in the battle over gun control. Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel is asking major lenders to stop doing business with firearms manufacturers. Meanwhile, New York City public advocate Bill de Blasio is calling on financial firms to yank investments from gun companies. He spoke with our own Megyn Kelly last week and had this to say.
This industry has got to get a hold of this situation and stop business as usual. I'm saying that as a parent, too. My child walks the streets of New York City, too. We can't have weapons available on the open market that could do such horrible damage. And as public officials, if we didn't use the tools at our disposal, there'd be something wrong with us.
Joining us now for a fair and balanced debate, Ellen Ratner, Bureau Chief of Talk Radio News Services and a Fox News contributor, and Mary Walter, radio talk show host. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
So is this the right direction to go? I'll start with you, Ellen.
It's the only direction to go. You know, in the 1960s, when there was so much apartheid going on in South Africa, students protested. They had companies getting rid of their stock holdings in South Africa, companies that were doing things in South Africa. That's the only thing that can sometimes work.
Mary?
So she's equating the Second Amendment to apartheid, which I think is absolutely appalling. And I find it interesting that instead of using what's legal, instead of passing a bill, if people are so behind this and these politicians are so sure of that, pass a bill, but instead they'd rather bully. Let's do bullying tactics. And I would love to see de Blasio give up his security detail or disarm his security detail. If he's really behind this, let's have it for everybody, not just the 1% who can afford private security or taxpayer security.
And Ellen, that's a good point. Is this an effort to surpass what they can't maybe do legally and pass a bill?
The problem is that the gun manufacturers, in my view, are very close with the NRA. They're trying to stop any good legislation that I think ought to happen. And don't forget, I also believe the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia before it says that everybody can have guns. Now, that's been a debate.
Look at what Thomas Jefferson and the people who wrote it said that means. Look at what they said that means.
I understand.
It's not your interpretation, it's theirs.
But there is certainly a liberal interpretation of that, of which
doesn't make it right.
Okay, well, I'm not sure your interpretation is right, but in any case, let's say it's there. So people have a right to have guns. But do they have a right in their having guns to not have the intensive background checks, to be able to have the gun show loophole? I don't think so, and I think you have to put pressure on the company.
But then, Ellen, that being said, do people also not have the right to invest in a company of their choosing, and do people not have a right to have a company of their choice?
You know, one time at Talkers Magazine, we gave them a Freedom of Speech Award to some guy, and I forget who was a talk show host, who advocated one thing, and to his opposite person, because we believe that both sides have the opposite, have the opinion. So companies and mayors have the option of saying, we're not going to do business with you guys, and people have the option of investing in the companies.
But when the government is bullying these businesses who are engaged in a legal practice, the government has a way, if they don't like it, to handle it, but they're not choosing to handle it legally because I think they know they're not going to get the votes to pass the legislation that they want to pass. And that whole gun, the left loves to talk about gun show loopholes. Senator Cruz just gave a testimony before Congress, and if you watch that, you would know that less than 2% of guns bought at gun shows are used in crimes. So less than 2%. That is a red herring. The real problem in this country is not the guns.
Well,
the real problem in this
country
is the angry young men in this country.
Let's talk about that statistic. You could look at all the guns bought in the United States, probably less than 2% are in crime.
So why don't we go after the real problem? The problem here is we have a generation of very angry young men. Why don't we look at why they think that the answer is to pick up a gun or a knife or a bat or a tire iron and go after someone? Why don't we look at the real problem of what's going on in our inner cities with our teenagers and our young men? We don't want to do that,
But wait, it's not just inner cities. I mean, if you look at the people who are doing these mass murders, they're not from inner cities.
You're only talking about mass murders. More people were killed in Chicago than killed by mass murders, but we don't want to talk about that.
No, and these mass murders as well also have not just been, you know, they haven't just used guns and firearms when they've done these mass murders either.
Timothy McVeigh didn't use a gun.
Sandy Hook was pretty much a gun.
But Timothy McVeigh didn't use a gun, and I didn't hear cries for banning rental trucks.
Sandy Hook, #1 on this list of de Blasio's list. He's got the top 12, the dirty dozen is what he's calling it. #1 is a private equity firm, Cerebras Capital. Capital Management, and they announced in the days following the Newtown shooting that it would sell the country's largest gun company, Freedom Group, who in fact produced the Bushmaster firearm that Adam Lanza used. So people taking steps themselves versus
great.
government
I mean,
overreach.
but I think that's great. But you have some people that are investing. I mean, look at the NRA membership actually went up after Sandy Hook.
Absolutely.
So I think that that mayors, such as the mayor of Chicago, do have, and the mayor and the assistant mayor, basically in New York, have a right to say to gun companies, "Hey, we're not going to do business with you unless you change some of your policies."
Mary, final
I
comment,
would
then we have to wrap up.
respect them if they disarmed their personal security and they live like the rest of us. If it's good enough for us, then it's good enough for them, and then I would respect it, but they won't do it.
Mary Ellen, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Greg?
Angry young men. It's all my fault.